Michelle Tam is the founder and co-creator of the renowned Nom Nom Paleo universe. Dubbed the Queen of Paleo Cooking, Michelle Tam has co-authored several cookbooks, the New York Times bestselling Nom Nom Paleo, Food for Humans, Ready or Not, and her most recent Nom Nom Paleo, Let's Go. She's also responsible for the Savour award-winning food blog and Webby award-winning cooking app. She is devoted to sharing paleo, gluten-free, and Whole30 recipes, kitchen tips and tricks with a focus on ancestral health, quick and easy eats, and staying paleo while on the go. Let's welcome Michelle Tam to the show. Michelle, the Nom Nom Paleo universe, creator. I've been following you for so long, and we talked about this before the show, but I'm so excited to have you as a guest today.
I am so excited to be a guest because I've been a big fan of yours and I've learned so much from you. And I'm always like, oh, what is Kelly saying? And I just listened to your podcast with Dr. Sims. Like, this is addressing what all my needs because I'm in that perimenopausal stage. My iron is low. I need to exercise. I feel like I have everything dialed in except for exercise because I hate it.
Yeah. Well, if anyone's going to motivate you for the long-term effects, it's Dr. Stacy Sims. So that was a good podcast for that, definitely. And I think she did a great job, just explaining when and how we should be working out and in relation to our menstrual cycles, which is so cool. So she's the expert there, but you're the expert on all things paleo, and I want to know, why did you ever get excited about paleo? What was going on for you personally, and what made you excited to start Nom Nom Paleo?
So I discovered paleo back in 2010. And that was when I was the mom of two young boys. And I think they were probably the age that your two sons are now. So this was a good 12 years ago. And I was working nights as the night shift pharmacist at Stanford Hospital. And so I was really tired all the time and busy. And I remember my husband and I were like, oh, we should do something to make ourselves, healthier. But we didn't have time to go to the gym because we had these two small kids. And we're like, oh, let's start exercise DVDs back when people used DVDs.
Yeah.
And so Henry started doing something called P90X.
Yep, I remember it.
Yep. And I was like, I'm going to do Chalene Extreme with Chalene Johnson.
Yeah.
So Henry, to keep himself accountable, he started blogging about it. And so he kind of had a P90X blog because he was blogging before, people were blogging. And so to make things interesting for himself, he started kind of researching the people behind the P90X videos, like all the people who were in the background. And then Mark Sisson was one of the people who was, I think, the nutritionist, or he came up with some sort of supplement for P90X. And so when Henry looked him up, he's like, oh, he's doing this new thing called Primal, and it sounds really interesting. And I was like, well, that sounds crazy, because I was a nutrition and food science major. Of course, this was in the early 90s. So that was back when fat was terrible, high carb, whole grains, all that.
Yeah. They're like, you should be low fat, high grains, all vegetarian.
Yes. And I remember Olestra, which was this fat substitute. It was supposed to be revolutionary. I was like, wow, that sounds amazing. But then it gave everyone the runs.
Yeah, you eat those potato chips made with Olestra and you're running to the bathroom with yellow oil coming out of you.
Terrible. And so Henry was like, I'm going to try this primal diet and I'm going to do P90X. And he immediately felt so much better. And he got a 6-pack right away. And he was like, oh, I'm going to try CrossFit. And then he was like, oh, how did your 90-day challenge go? What are your before and after pictures like? And I'm like, mine look worse. Because I think I was exercising so crazy and I was eating my same, way that I was eating, but I was getting hungry so much from exercising so much. And I was like, maybe I'll give this primal thing a shot.
Yeah.
So I started eating kind of paleo and I was like, this sounds ridiculous. I've cut out red meat, and what do you mean whole grains are bad for you? But as soon as I tried it, I felt so much better. And I think because I worked night shift, and I was always flipping 7 nights on, 7 off, I felt so much better.
Wow.
And so, then I became this annoying paleo evangelist. And my sister was like, I don't want you talking about this dumb paleo thing anymore. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'll just put it on the internet. And I started a Tumblr blog and I started talking about it. And that's just kind of how things went. And now like 12 years later, I am way less. I mean, I almost feel like my whole, they're like, oh, you're the person who promotes paleo. I'm like, well, sort of. I mean, my whole thing is I think people should figure out what works for them and actually pay attention to how food makes you feel. And everybody is different. And you can try this and kind of try a real food approach. But I love food too much to kind of forever only eat certain things. And so I mean, for me, it was so eye opening because I just did whatever I was told was healthy. And
Yeah.
I never actually thought about how I felt. Like, so my whole life, I felt terrible. Like, I used to have all this gut stuff and all sorts of terrible GI stuff that nobody talks about with your friends. So I thought everybody had it.
Yeah.
Um, but then when it all kind of went away, when I started eating paleo and cutting out certain things, like I think I discovered I was celiac. And I was like, oh, no wonder, like I feel so much better. Um, and so my thing isn't so much that you have to eat perfectly paleo. I have tons of friends who are vegans and all sorts of pescatarian, Mediterranean. I just want people to cook their own meals, but make them as, quick and easy and tasty as possible. Because I think for me, the whole turning point was I have to just figure out how to, like, I love to eat, but I hate to cook. So, how do I motivate people who are similar to me? And I think there are a lot of people like me who like to watch a lot of food TV,
Yeah.
but don't actually want to do it. Or when you have tried it, it's so like expensive or time consuming. And you're like, oh, this is not at all what I was hoping this had to be. Um, and so that's why like our website has like step-by-step pictures, our books are step-by-step, and there are cartoons cheering you on just because I know what it's like to not want to cook.
This is actually mind-blowing to me because being a someone who follows along with you, I wouldn't have thought that you didn't like to cook. I would think that you were so inspired by your kitchen and all the foods that you make and all the flavorful meals that you make. I mean, I have always loved your stuff because it seemed approachable. Like it seemed pretty easy, maybe pretty quick. You use a lot of pressure cooker style recipes and things that mean, I've even seen you cook meat in a microwave. So,
Yeah. My whole thing is shortcuts to deliciousness. I do want it to taste good because I am very picky. Like, I just love to eat.
yeah,
But the reality is I don't love to cook. But I think of it like flossing and taxes, right? Like nobody wants to do it, but you have to. And the more you practice it, the better you get. And so it is easier for me to kind of throw something together, like a meal for people, just because I have these tools and I've kind of figured out these shortcuts. Like I always tell people, figure out which foods add umami, which is like the fifth taste,
hmm
besides like sweet, sour, salty, and bitter. Like it's the savoriness and deliciousness. And once you figure out which foods, like which ingredients contain it, just add it to your food and things will just taste better magically. So add like mushrooms, tomato paste, like fish sauce, anchovies, meat, bacon, all those things add umami. And when you add more than one, it's kind of like this umami synergy where it's like exponentially like more umami. Um, but I think like don't just stick with salt. I think a lot of people are like, oh, I'll do salt and pepper and maybe I'll add some lemon juice for,
yeah.
a little bit extra. I'm like, no, there's just add a little fish sauce or add a little like coconut aminos or, something that adds like an oomph of flavor and it'll just taste better.
Well, I have to say, your magic mushroom powder is something that I use. I've done pork butt in my Instapot with your magic mushroom powder and like the juice of an orange and a little bit of like garlic salt, and it is. I mean, like every single time I make that, Chris is like, "What is this? It's so good."
It's
And
the mushroom plus the pork shoulder. You know what I
well,
mean? It's like magical.
it's magical, but I have to say, if Chris knew that there were mushrooms anywhere near this meal, he wouldn't eat it. Like he absolutely wouldn't even touch it with a 10-foot pole. So it's things like that where you've made it really easy for people. And I love all your new spices, by the way. Kudos to you. They are
Oh, thank
phenomenal.
you.
There's such and for people who are just getting started or want something fast and they don't want to, put together their own mix, I've loved all of them. So, and it
Thank
includes
you.
the magic mushroom powder. So such good stuff and definitely a way to make quick and easy meals taste delicious.
I mean, my
Um,
whole thing is like I just want to like my easiest meals are normally I have some sort of protein and then I just grab a seasoning blend because instead of grabbing salt, grab one of these things because it has salt in it plus other
yeah.
stuff. And that's all you need. And then like, add a little oil, throw it in your air fryer, throw it in the oven, throw it in the Instant Pot, and you'll have something tasty. And you can use those same spices on some vegetables that you can quickly like micro steam. Like I've been using the microwave quite a bit because
Yeah.
it's a great way to quickly cook vegetables. And people are like, oh, it like kills all the nutrients. I'm like, no, actually, it's supposed to preserve them more than if you were to blanch them or to boil them. Um, and it's fast. And so that's my whole thing.
Yeah, I think, there's definitely, I wrote an article one time about the microwave because there's some stuff out there where it's
Mm-hmm.
really bad for you and it's radiation and was something like 1,000 times the radiation from your iPhone in your pocket than even
Yeah.
standing with your face next to your microwave. And just if people are curious about the chemistry or the actual mechanism that heats, it's microwaves that cause the water molecules to spin in the food, creating heat,
Yeah.
which is why sometimes if you're microwaving something frozen, you get hot pockets.
Mm-hmm.
Is if there's more water that was frozen in that specific area, that's going to create a hot pocket and kind of like potentially create more uneven cooking. Whereas if something is fresh, the water molecules are evenly distributed in like the broccoli you're steaming. So,
Yeah. And I do think the container that you microwave in makes a difference. So I didn't use microwaves very much. And then like there's this company that came out and this is just like the Instapot. These are not companies I work with. I just did a one partnership with Any Day, but they don't pay me to talk about their stuff. I just think
yeah.
it's amazing. But it's these amazing glass bowls that seal perfectly so it steams. And there's a vent so that like air can escape so your thing doesn't, you know,
Explode.
yeah, explode exactly.
Yeah.
But it perfectly steams stuff, which you can't normally do in a microwave. And that's why, and then people are like, oh, why would you cook this in the microwave? I'm like, well, there are certain things that just work better in the microwave. Certain things work better in the Instant Pot or pressure cooker. Like you just figure out which things work better in which kind of appliance. And I mean, I do like a lot of gadgets, and people are like, how come you have so many gadgets? I'm like, well, I don't have a tiny New York City apartment.
Yeah.
So but these things, I feel like if I didn't have them, my family would not be eating, period.
Homemade meals. Yeah.
Or they just wouldn't be eating tasty food.
Right. Okay. So now it's called Any Day, the glass
Mhm.
steaming.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think like David Chang. So I was like, what are these things? Because David Chang was talking about it and I follow him. But the woman who like runs the business, her father, I think, is the guy who invented Meyer Corp, which is like a huge cookware brand. And so
Cool.
so even though this is a new company, I was like, these are such well-made glass containers because they're like thick borosilicate, like those Pyrex
Yeah.
measuring cups. And it's because she's in this Meyer Corp family. So they have like really great quality things already.
Wonderful. I will put
Yeah.
a link to Any Day in our show notes for this. And now
Yeah,
we have to,
cool.
I mean, you kind of just opened up a can of worms because I love learning from chefs. I love learning from home cooks. You're
Yes,
kind
I'm a
of
home
like
cook, not a
you're
chef.
you're kind of like a blend though because you do get fancy quickly. So I want to know when you talk about your gadgets and the things that you use, it's
Mhm,
about knowing what to cook where.
mhm,
What are your favorite appliances and gadgets, and what do
mhm.
you specifically like to cook in each of them and why?
Okay, so I mean, I think people always think of me as like the Instant Pot person because I did think the Instant Pot was, and I still think it is amazing.
Yeah.
But I think people try to cook too many things in there that they shouldn't. Like the things you should cook in a pressure cooker are things that you would braise and stew. So stews are amazing, soups are amazing because it cuts the cooking time like in half. Like cuts of meat that are have lots of collagen, like pork shoulder, brisket, chuck roast. Those things are magical in the Instant Pot because the
Yeah.
way that they become tender is with like low and slow cooking or high temperature like pressure cooking that kind of melts all the collagen and makes it all delicious.
It's all the
Um,
shreddy stuff.
Yes. And I think sometimes people think, well, I'm just going to throw in like a pork loin. I'm like, dude, that will shred, but that will be super dry and gross because it's not fatty and it doesn't have the collagen. So you really do need these really cheap and amazing cuts. So I'm always stocking up on pork shoulder, brisket, chuck roast, lamb shanks, and those things go in the Instant Pot. And the great thing about the Instant Pot, it's like a slow cooker. You can throw it in the morning and it'll keep it warm. So by the time you come home or whenever you're ready to eat, you're like, wow, amazing stewed meat. And you know what I mean? Or if you don't have time and you have like an hour, you could still kind of throw it in. And then it only takes maybe 15 minutes to season it and kind of throw stuff in, just like your pork shoulder with the magic mushroom powder and orange juice. But you can go and like sit down and watch TV like while it's
Yeah.
cooking, which is what I would do.
Yeah.
Um, for a long time, I resisted the air fryer because I was like, that's just like a convection oven. That's not a big deal. But then when I actually got like a pretty good one, like I bought one and I was like, wow, this is really expensive and the capacity is really small. I don't know if I like it.
Yeah.
And then Instamot came out with one. They're not a sponsor. And again, what I love about it is if it sucks, I can say it sucks because I don't work with them.
Yeah.
But I really do like the Instant Pot air fryer. They have a 6 quart, I think it's called the Vortex Plus, and it's the #1 rated air fryer by Cooks Illustrated. So it's not just me. They think it's great. The one thing a lot of people have reservations about is that it does have like a nonstick, coating. And so people are like, poison. And oh, the first time I used it, it smelled plasticky. Well, the first time, before you use it the first time, you should wash it with hot soapy water.
Yeah.
And that normally makes you not have the plastic smell. But the people at Cooks Illustrated were like, well, it doesn't go above 400 degrees. And you worry about kind of the non toxic or the toxic, whatever, the non-stick coating becoming
Right.
toxic at high temperatures. So that's something I love. Like I throw anything I kind of throw in the oven, I throw into the air fryer now because it cooks it faster and it's got like the fan. I mean, the thing about the air fryer is it's just like a little countertop oven with a fan inside that kind of whips the hot air around, but it makes things cook faster, it makes things crispy. It doesn't truly fry anything,
Yeah.
but I actually have made some really tasty like paleo like chicken nuggets and paleo fish sticks because I put crushed plantain chips because those are already crunchy.
Yeah.
And then you can spray it with a little avocado oil and you put it in and it stays crunchy and it's fast and delicious. So that's kind of what I like. I'm trying to think what other those are kind of oh, and I like the microwave now that I have those any day bowls because I micro steam vegetables all the time. Like literally, I wash and I shake off the excess liquid after I've washed some vegetables and I pop it in these bowls. And in 2 minutes, you have like perfectly steamed vegetables. I mean, obviously, the more you put in, the longer the time. Um, but this is how my family gets a fast vegetable like with dinner.
I mean, it's this kind of hack though that if someone's not eating veggies because it feels
Mm-hmm,
like it's going to take too long to roast them, or they
mm-hmm,
don't know how to steam them, or they don't like the texture of a blanched broccoli,
mm-hmm.
and they're like, nah, it's boring. Like, you can steam a veggie and then make a delicious, quick,
Mm-hmm.
delicious sauce, like to drizzle on top, or even just like a really good pre-made sauce to drizzle on top, and all of a sudden you're like olive oil and one of your seasonings, and steamed veggies taste
Yeah.
delicious.
Or you could like steam them and keep them in the fridge because some people don't like kind of hot steamed vegetables, but like then it's kind of like a cold, crisp, like tender, crisp, blanched vegetable. And my kids will totally have those in their salads, and then it's ready for them to pack for school. Like, here's some, blanched but cold broccoli that you can take to school.
Yeah.
And so I just try to like I always have some sort of main and I try to have two vegetable sides. And I don't eat a lot of like grains just because I could totally become a type 2 diabetic. Like I think like I wore a CGM for a few months just to check. And I have family history. And then I think working night shift for 12 years really did a number on my
For sure.
metabolism and all sorts of stuff. Um, so I don't eat a ton of grains, but like my family eats. Like I saw you made like a chicken broth rice. I was like, I've been making that for my family. I use a rice cooker though. I saw you did it in a pot, but
Yeah.
the Zojirushi rice cooker is pretty amazing. Like it makes people like, oh, I never have perfect rice. I'm like, well, you need to be like an Asian person and buy a rice cooker.
Yeah. Okay, what's your favorite rice cooker?
The Zojirushi Fuzzy Logic is amazing. And it's not super cheap, but it makes perfect rice. Like I make a chicken rice just like yours. I put in some basmati or jasmine rice, and then I throw in some bone broth. I actually put in some of my umami stir fry powder as seasoning, and then like a little ghee, and I pop it in, and you just measure to the line. Like there's little rice cups, like, and you do 3 rice cups, and there's actually lines on the rice cooker. It says fill your liquid to the 3 level if you if you put in 3 cups. So super
Perfect.
fast, and that cooks while and you don't have to babysit it. What I like is like minimal time throwing in. Like even if something takes longer, like rice in the rice cooker might take 45 minutes, but you can go away. You can like you throw it in, go pick up your kids from practice or whatever, be their Uber driver, and then you come back, it's ready and hot and you can serve food.
Well, I'm not in the Uber driver stage yet, but I know that I need
You
to
will be.
prepare for it. I'm in the stage though where I am cooking and I have a toddler attached to my leg, reaching up
Yeah.
for
Yep.
sharp knives and or sauces or to play. Like I'm happy to have them help me and be my sous chef, but
Mm-hmm.
like things over the stove, like making a bone broth rice or
Mm-hmm.
like, sautéing something or
Mm-hmm.
searing something. I use my oven and my air fryer
Mm-hmm.
and my pressure cooker probably the most just because if they're helping me, it's like, help me chop these veggies, help me season
Mm-hmm.
these veggies or season the meat. But then after that, it's like we got to leave it alone. We got to go play Duplos and then come back to a
Yeah.
completely cooked meal. So these are the kind of tips, I that really help, I think, a home cook because if we
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing. It's like I'd rather be playing. I'd rather be playing with
Mm-hmm.
my kids than cooking, but I'm cooking for them in the same way that you were for the last 12 years cooking for your family. It's like if I don't
Mm-hmm.
do it, we'll eat something that maybe doesn't make us all feel great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like I was like, let's go get takeout or let's just go out. And I never felt great afterwards. Like I actually perpetually thought I had food poisoning. And I remember because I was a food science major and I had taken a food microbiology class, and they're like, well, for toxins, the dose equals the response. And so some people, a little bit of toxin will cause problems, and other people, they could eat whatever. And so I just was like, I must be very sensitive. And every time I go out, like even though no one else is sick, I just am more sensitive. But then I was like, no, I think there are just certain foods that didn't agree with me that I should avoid.
Right. So let's talk about how paleo helped you figure that out and how it's evolved for you over time.
Mhm.
Like, what did you start to uncover when you did strip away certain foods and really lean into whole foods, like a main protein and 2 vegetable sides? Like, what has this journey been like for you personally?
Well, I think I was hungry all the time before. And I used to have all of these crazy like sugar spikes because I think I just ate carb, 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 carb all the time, but it was like whole grain carbs, so it was okay. But
Yeah.
like my breakfast would just be like, I don't know, something terrible, like grape nuts and then like non-fat milk and then a big thing of fruit or like a big fruit smoothie, not like a protein and fiber packed Fab Four smoothie.
Yeah.
And so I would just have these kind of, I think, peaks and valleys, and I get hangry and I was like bloated or I had GI stuff all the time. But I just didn't think that wasn't normal because that's just how I was my whole life. Um, and I think when I started kind of eating real food, I was like, oh my gosh, like I have a waist. I used to always joke. I'm like, I no matter what, I just don't have a waist. And I think it was because I was just bloated all the time.
Yeah.
Um, and I didn't realize it. I was like, oh, I don't know. And then because I used to work nights and I would switch back and forth. Obviously I was tired all the time, but I would be like, it was almost bordering on narcolepsy where I'm like, oh, I'm just so tired. I just pass out. And then I just didn't have that anymore when I started just kind of eating real food. And, I think just naturally paleo is lower carb. It's not a low carb diet per se, but I think it's like lower carb and there's more fiber and you're eating a lot of nutrient dense foods instead of just, what like things that you're told are healthy, but when you actually look at how many nutrients are in it, there aren't really nutrients in it or all sorts of other things. So I just felt a lot better. And I think, I mean, anybody who starts any type of change that makes them feel great, you're like, I have to shout it from the rooftops and tell
Yeah.
everybody. Um, but definitely now things have totally, I joke that I'm probably the least dogmatic paleo person. I'm only paleo on the internet
Yeah.
because all the stuff I post is paleo, but I also try to be very transparent, like in my Instagram stories and on my Instagram, like I'm going out to eat, but my one thing that I have to do is I have to be gluten free when I go out to eat. Um, and also because I'm not a spring chicken anymore, and because I have these blood sugar issues, I'm not gonna go crazy and get 10 things of gluten-free treats because I'm just going to feel terrible.
Right.
Um, so I think, again, I just think, I mean, it's hard because I don't think anyone ever wants to be really honest with themselves. Like, you might know that something doesn't work for you, but then you still do it.
Oh,
But just
yeah.
acknowledge, I know this is not the best thing, but I don't care. I'm making that decision instead of just pretending you have no idea, you know?
Right. Really get to know yourself and the symptoms you have after food. Make a choice
Yeah.
instead of a cheat, and just know that that's gonna, maybe there are ways to mitigate damages or
Hmm.
symptoms. I mean, that's kind of what I think about when I'm like working with clients too, when it comes to making, say you decide to have a gluten-free treat and you're like,
Hmm.
okay, I'm gonna do this. We're on vacation and I'm getting some gluten-free treat in Hawaii or wherever you
Hmm.
are, and you're like, okay, I'm going for it. What does the aftermath look like? What did it look
Hmm.
like going into it? Was it like a higher protein lunch and you have a
Hmm.
plan for dinner and you're gonna go, okay, like I'm crashing down after this whatever ice
Yeah.
cream, but I know I'm going to get some high quality protein after this,
Yeah.
and I'm on vacation, so I'll sleep better than I do at home, and go from there. I think that's a great call. So you don't eat grains and you don't eat gluten. Were you
I eat
formerly?
some, I do eat some rice and I eat some corn, but I do try to make sure, I started following Glucose Goddess
Yeah.
recently this year, and I love her. I was like, oh, these tips are so great. So I take a little bit of apple cider vinegar. Like if I know that I'm going to eat something carby, but I do kind of follow her thing where you eat like the veggies first and the protein and fat. And then if you do have some sort of carb, you can have it at the very end.
Hmm.
And then I'll go on a walk after my meals, and that automatically adds, some steps. And it also, brings your blood sugar down. So, I mean, for me, it is about, because I think you can eat what people say is like the perfect diet, right? And have it be squeaky clean. But like if you have no friends and you're not getting any sleep, you're gonna feel terrible and miserable. So I think it all has to work together.
It does, and it's all about balance and like having grace with
Hmm.
yourself too. I love Glucose Goddess's hacks, and she's been on the show. She did
Hmm.
a couple times actually, and anyone talking about blood sugar is exciting for me because I know that people are getting some information that can help them.
And
Um,
there's such simple things. It's like, oh, I think for me, one of my favorite dishes is like pho, like Vietnamese beef like soup with rice noodles. But every time I'd eat a bowl of pho, I was like, oh my gosh, I literally have to fall asleep afterwards. And then I tested my blood sugar after. I'm like, oh my gosh, my blood sugar is super high and it stays super high for a long time. But if I kind of followed her thing, like, oh, I can sub out most of the noodles, maybe have some vegetables in there. I eat the vegetables first, then I eat the meat, and then at the end I can have a little bit of the noodles. Or before this, I pregame with some apple cider vinegar, you know, and then afterwards we go on a walk. Like all those things would bring down my blood sugar instead of like me just eating the pho and then just like, oh, I have to fall asleep and there's nothing I can do. But there are things you can do.
There are so many things you can do, and that's exactly it. It's like how are you going in and how are you coming out of that?
Mm-hmm.
Because nothing is off limits, and there are definitely ways. I'm sure too, just like following those steps, you're more full by the time you get to the rice noodles.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
Meanwhile, the restaurants are like, here's the bread, here's the
Yeah.
tortilla chips,
Yes.
here's the, I don't know, little like breadsticks. You're like, no, please don't.
No, totally. And it's
Like,
at the beginning, right? And so whenever things get delivered now, I'm always like, okay, I love tortilla chips, but I'm going to wait. I'm going to have my salad and
yeah,
then I'm going to eat my other things. Then I'll have some chips at the end, you know?
perfect. I
But it's
love that.
hard. And I know people are hungry and then it's just right in front of them. But I was like, you can do it when you're like my kids and they're like growing teenage boys. Like, I'm going to eat my rice first. I'm like, wow, lucky you.
Yeah.
But
I
yeah.
know. Well, let's talk about your boys because I'm behind you a little bit in years, but I want to know about how you inspire them to, eat whole foods and what has it, are any of them picky or, you know,
Yeah.
give me the deeds on
All
being
the
a
things.
mom of boys who love all the sugar and carbs.
My kids still love all the sugar and carbs. I mean, I think the reason I remember when I started Nom Nom Paleo, like, and people saw that I had kids and they're like, how do you feed your kids? How do you feed your kids? And I realized that I purposely didn't talk about it because I wasn't feeding them the way I was eating.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized it's like, oh, this is not cool. Like, why is it that I won't eat their leftovers? Why is it that it's not good enough for me, but I'll serve it to my kids? And so that's when I was like, okay, the whole family is going to get on board. And so my kids do eat whatever I serve them at home.
Mhm.
And and their lunches are, I think they're pretty similar to your lunches still, but bigger portions, right? So there's always a protein, there's some sort of fat, and there's some veggies and maybe some fruit. And then they have some junky,
Yeah.
I don't know, like
Like a
packaged stuff.
bag of something.
Right. I mean, we try to buy like the healthier stuff at the Thrive Market, but it is it is still junk.
Yeah.
Um, but my kids, I think, eat, you know, they probably eat like 80% healthy. And then when they're out of the house, I just, I I hope that I've raised them so that they make smart choices. And I think that we talk about stuff a lot. Like, especially like when our kids like they're 14 and 17. And so, like, when they were like getting acne and stuff, I'm like, oh, well, maybe this has to do with like your blood sugar or you're just eating all these empty carbs. And, why don't you try it? Why don't we just try just cutting down on that? Or, and they would see, they're like, oh, my skin is clearing up. And so sometimes you have to appeal to their vanity.
Yeah.
But I do think kids do realize when they feel better and, when they eat certain things and when they don't. Um, and again, we're not super dogmatic about it. So I don't feel like they have to run to their friend's house and then like raid their pantry
Right.
and eat it all before coming home.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really important that things aren't off limits, but that you're
Mm-hmm,
just like laying the foundation for them to get those high quality macronutrients and
mm-hmm,
vitamins and minerals and like you said, in a quick but like really delicious way.
mm-hmm.
So now we
Yeah,
have
like
to
my younger son,
yeah.
like we're like, okay, for breakfast to make sure you're gonna have protein, we're gonna make you a Fab Four smoothie. And so
Yeah.
he's like, oh, this tastes really good. And he's like, wait, what are you putting in there? And like I was putting in like the spinach and the chia seeds and the hemp seeds and all the stuff.
Yeah.
Like next time I don't want to see you put the stuff in, just give it to me and I'll drink it because it tastes fine, but I don't need to know there's like vegetables in there. But but I was like, these are things like, and I think that we just kind of tell them like, okay, you should prioritize protein because you guys are growing.
Yeah.
And like, okay, an egg only has 6 grams of protein, so it's just kind of like just knowing, and it's good to have at least like 30 grams I mean, that's probably
Yeah.
even low for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, like you can't just eat like a quesadilla and like whatever it is. You like that's like no protein, and no nutrients.
I see a major difference in my son's temperament, in
Hmm.
their energy levels, in how they snack, everything when they get that protein in. I mean,
Hmm.
baby T, I made a pack of bacon this morning and I think he ate like 6 to 7 pieces. He's one and a half. Like, that's okay, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
And at another meal, he probably won't eat anything, right? So I
right.
think at that age, it's like whatever
Yeah.
kind of goes. You try your best, and when they're hungry, they'll let you know.
Right. And I look at that and I'm like, okay, well, I do try to prioritize good quality proteins because I know that their bodies are growing and I know what
Hmm.
they're being built from. But yeah, I mean, and I'm all for it. So it's just funny to me. But I was like, buddy, save some for the rest of us.
Yeah. No, I know. And fancy bacon is not cheap. So that's another
No,
thing, right? There's certain things where it's like you teenage boys are eating us out of house and home. Like we have to figure out. I was like, I'm gonna have to stock up, when things go on sale.
definitely. So let's talk about that because I joke with Chris that I need to be shopping at Costco now, and
Oh
they're
yeah.
only 1.5 and 3.5. What's going to happen when they're, 11 and 13? It's going to be nutty around here. So how are you frugal with your grocery bills, especially nowadays when I feel like with inflation, you're like, how much was that?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
I mean, I
what are your
think
tips
being
and tricks?
being raised by like a Chinese immigrant mom, like I've always looked for a sale and I've always looked for a deal because that's like it's almost like a point of pride when you can get something on sale.
Yeah.
And so I've been a Costco member ever since it was like Price Club. So I don't even
Yeah.
that was probably before you were born.
No, I remember Price Club. I remember Price Club. California native here. I remember when they would send my mom's checks up the tube, and I'd be
Yeah.
so excited to watch it like go to the office.
So funny. So I do a lot of shopping at Costco. Thrive Market's also a really great place. I think though, one thing I do prioritize, I'm also a crazy person that will spend money on food, but I won't spend it on anything else. Like I need my shirts to cost like $4 or something, which is terrible because the way clothes are made. And if they cost that little, it's bad. Or I just have really old clothes, right? And I don't buy fancy bags. We have like these, I have a beater Toyota Camry, you know what I mean? But I love food and I will spend a lot on food because I just love it so much. And so obviously when I go out to eat, I spend a lot on food. But then for home, I also try to get the best quality for the best price. And so Costco really is a great place to do that. Trader Joe's is a great place to do that. Sprouts is a good place, or just regular stores when they're on sale. But like Costco, I remember I went to some dinner about like the Marine Stewardship Council, about like sustainable seafood, and I was like, hey, so how is Costco seafood? Because it's a great price, and they're like, yeah, all that stuff is MSC certified. It might not have the blue label on it, but the standards are really high. So I'm like, oh, that's amazing. I'm going to totally buy the wild Chilean sea bass there and other fish there and the shrimp and stuff because I know that it's sustainable and it's a really great price. The only problem with buying stuff at Costco is you need a big freezer.
Yeah.
But and then Costco has all sorts of, they have grass fed and grass finished ground beef. Like I try to buy cheaper cuts, and I also utilize the pressure cooker, because of that. Because the cuts I mentioned before, like pork shoulder, chuck roast, lamb shanks, brisket, those are cheaper cuts. But you do need to cook them the right way for them to be delicious. And I eat a lot of ground meat. Chickens, you buy them whole, or you eat like the chicken thighs or chicken legs. You know what I mean? Like, and you can
Yep.
utilize all parts of it. Like, if you buy a whole chicken, you can roast it, but then you can save the bones and throw them in stock. That kind of stuff. But
Great tips. I mean, you're making me wanna, I have a Costco membership, but you're making me want to shop there more. And so there you
I
go. There's
think
a great.
Costco is easier now that they have self-checkout. I think it's the whole idea of like just going to the store and then there's so many people and you're in line forever. But with the self-checkout, it's pretty fast. And if you go in with the idea that you're just going to get a few things, like there is this bone broth at our Costco, and I know every Costco is different, but it's like this butcher's bone broth by Roli Roti, which is this. It used to be a food truck in San Francisco that made these amazing rotisserie chickens and porchetta, and they started making this chicken bone broth. I think they also have turkey and beef, but like because they have whole chickens that they're roasting, they have all these bones and feet and skin. So it's super, super collagenous
Oh, yeah.
bone broth. And depending on the store you go to, it's like 24 ounces. I've seen it for like $11.99. But then
Wow.
at Costco, they have a 2-pack for like $8 or $9.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the ingredients are just like chicken bones and maybe carrots. There's like no salt or anything. And I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And it's super chunky, gelatinous stuff. And I think sometimes when people like, there are a lot of bone broth companies, they're like, oh, we have all this collagen. I'm like, okay, well, maybe you put in like collagen peptides because it does not solidify in my refrigerator.
Right. No, that's always a telltale sign. I did hear too that like some bone broth companies who've come to market and tried to
Hmm.
scale too quickly are now using bone broth powder
Yeah.
and creating bone broth from pre-made bone broth powder, which is
Yeah.
such a disservice because that's not what we're looking for. We're looking
I mean,
for,
it still is. I mean, if
yeah,
you
it's
are to, yeah,
dehydrated, it's
yeah,
okay, it's gone
yeah,
through the whole process. Yeah, no, it's definitely still beneficial, but
yeah,
I'm like you. I want that fat cap on top, and I want
yeah.
that
And it's
gelatin.
super thick. It's super thick. I'm like, oh, this is better than stuff I make.
Well, let's talk about the things that you make because you have three really well-known cookbooks and they are fun, like with your cartoon characters, kind of fun. So, what are some of your favorite recipes? What are you making for your boys and your husband? And yeah, what does day in the life of you look like for food?
What's funny is it changes because I still have, the Nom Nom Paleo blog and app. So I'm always creating content for that. And so I'm always testing new recipes. And my kids always joke, like, because people are always asking, like, what's your favorite recipe from this book? Or what is it from this book? And I was like, I haven't had that dish in a long time because, like, I test it. And then we all get sick of it. But then I'm moving on to the next thing. But there are certain dishes that I make all the time. Like, I think Ollie's crackling chicken, which it's not even a recipe, it literally is chicken thighs with skin on, bone out. And you can buy it that way at a Japanese market. They have bone out, skin on chicken thighs. Um, I season the meat side with some sort of seasoning blend. And I put salt on the skin because I think otherwise it just burns and you want a super crispy skin. And you can pan fry it, or these days I just throw it in the air fryer and it gets super crispy. All the fat under the skin like renders out, but the skin stays super crispy. So that's like a super easy meal that we have on rotation all the time. And I make stir fries all the time. Like people think that I make really fancy stuff, and I kind of do if like I'm developing a recipe that's fancier, but day to day, it's like stir fries, instant pot stews or soups, and crackling chicken.
So the crackling chicken, am I going, when you say put salt on it, am I putting a lot of salt on the
Just
skin?
salt on the skin. I I'm probably I'm very heavy-handed with the salt. And I know you like sodium. So
Oh, I'm all
yeah.
for sodium. I'm not afraid of salt.
Yeah.
I just want to go make this recipe because I have chicken thighs in my freezer. And when you
Yeah.
say bone out, do I cut
No,
to
so if you
expose the bone
no,
or
so I cut it out. So if do you have a good pair of kitchen
oh
shears?
yeah.
Yeah, that is the easiest way. And if you look up like crackling chicken on my website, you can look it up and I show you how to easily cut the bone out with scissors. So don't use like a boning knife or whatever and hurt yourself. You literally use a sharp pair of kitchen shears and you just cut it out. You cut around the little joint and you cut really close to the bone and you just cut it out. And then I kind of like to flatten the chicken thigh because it is like fatter or
Yeah.
thicker right next to the bone, but you just kind of you flatten it, then you put seasoning on the meat, but only salt on the skin.
Yep.
And then depending if you're pan frying does kind of make a mess.
Yeah.
So if you have
No,
an
I have
air
an air
fryer,
fryer. I'm
yeah,
good.
throw it in the air fryer
Skin up
and
or skin down?
skin up. You don't even need to flip it.
Okay.
And I think it's depending on the size of your chicken thighs, it's like 15 to 17 minutes. But the thing is, because there is so much fat under the skin, you may have to pour some of the fat out in between batches, depending on how many you're making, because your air fryer can smoke. People are like, my air fryer is smoking a lot. I'm like, that's because you have all this fat like
Yeah.
pooled at the bottom.
Yeah.
But you should try crackling chicken. It will, your kids will be like, wow, this chicken is so tasty, and you did like nothing. It's like a fake recipe.
Yes, I'm making this because they're in my freezer right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so like maybe check on it at the 5 or 10 minute mark and drain out some fat if need be.
No, do it in between batches. So the first batch, just let it go. Don't even worry about the fat at the bottom.
Okay.
But when you're gonna, if you have to put in a second batch, like pour out the fat and then layer in the chicken.
Okay.
And also with the air fryer, like, they're like, oh, keep lots of space. With the crackling chicken, you can actually, you should have it in a single layer, but you can smash them in and it'll look super tight, but they will shrink up as they're cooking.
Yep.
So I pack in six. No, six is if I have small. So five. Five I can pack in.
Okay.
Unless
Well,
they're ginormous thighs.
I have the Breville, so it looks like a mini toaster oven. So I could probably do my whole
Oh, see
batch.
okay. So if you have a Breville, you probably have to put a tray underneath to catch the fat. So you
Definitely.
can put it in the, like I have a Breville too, but the Breville, okay, crackling chicken makes a mess in the Breville.
Yeah.
And so that's my only caveat is like
Okay.
it'll probably splatter all over. And so
So
you may want
so
to stovetop it then if you don't have
that's
a
okay.
basket type. Yeah.
I'll stovetop. Talk to me because the Breville also has the non-stick lining, but it's in the walls
Yeah.
of the
So
oven,
so what
which
people love is that the Breville, the baskets are stainless steel.
I know. That's why
Um,
I went with that one.
yeah,
But
and I
there,
had that too. But then it just gets too messy
yeah.
when you want to cook other things in there. And so that's why I bit the bullet and I got the Instant Pot basket type, because the thing that it rests in is nonstick coated. And so,
Do you ever cover it? I mean, you can't really cover it, right? I mean,
you can, some people, there are these, I think, parchment liners that people use.
yeah.
I haven't, because sometimes I'm like, okay, I can try my best to do all the things, but
Yeah.
this is the one vice I have, and it's using
Yeah.
my Instant Pot with the thing. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, trade-offs.
I totally understand.
You're
though.
making your food at home.
Yeah.
It's already a benefit. We're just talking this out. We're just talking this out.
No, but I hear you.
Girlfriends on a phone call, guys.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's just like, well, what about this? What about that? Yeah, I know. All right. If there's like someone listening from Instapot or Breville, you need to do this. We got to.
I know some people there are silicone liners for it, but my whole thing with silicone is I know that I think
It still degrades with heat.
Exactly, right? And I think people think it's like the magic replacement for plastic. And I do use silicone, but I don't think it's quite as safe as people think it is. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my thing too. Like, we love a stainless steel lunchbox, and I have those silicone, like, reusable zip top baggies for like certain snacks that I'm throwing in a lunchbox for bash. But yeah, I mean, you put even their little silicone plates right now, you put them in, I don't know, like they absorb scents and soaps, and I know that they're slightly degrading since or degraded since we first got them, and so nothing's perfect, unfortunately, but like glass and stainless steel when you can, but obviously no one can be perfect, and that's not the point.
With kids, it's like, I know that you should and if you have your kids in a Montessori program, they're all using like cutlery and glass, everything. But I was like, realistically, like if you're trying to get food on the table and everybody like off to their next thing, like you don't want to be like, picking up glass shards off the floor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you just
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like whatever stage of life you're in
Mhm.
dictates the need of what your family's needs and how you show up for them. And yeah. And so if the air fryer is getting you, 10 to 15 crackling chickens on the table and a bunch
yeah.
of veggies, then that's how you do it. Awesome. Well, I have to know what's next for you.
I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I started Nom Nom Paleo as like a fun hobby. And then luckily I was able to kind of quit my night job and kind of do this full time. But my whole thing is like when it's not fun anymore, I'm just not going to do it. And
Right.
I'm at the age, and I told you this earlier, I'm like, I'm at the age where I'm like, when am I going to retire? Like, this could be, I don't know. If I don't like it, I really will just kind of shut it all down, turn off the lights.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. Like people are like, are you gonna have a next book? I'm like, now is not the time to ask me about a next book because our books take so much time to make because we do everything ourselves. Like Henry, my husband, shoots all the pictures. We do it in our home kitchen. He designs everything cover to cover. He draws the cartoons, and he has a full time job as an attorney, and so he's really busy. Um,
You're like, babe, but we have a book to write.
no, and I agree. And we always talk about this because we go on these walks and we talk about like whatever. And I'm always like, I'm ready to potentially retire. But I don't know. I mean, right now I'm like, oh, I still like, developing recipes for the blog. But there's definitely stuff I think sometimes I follow people on Instagram and I follow people who give you tips on Instagram or social media and they're like, you need to make a reel every day or you need to do this. And at first I was like, oh man, like I guess I should try it. But then I was like, nope, I don't know. That's just not fun. I'm gonna do things that I enjoy and I think are gonna be helpful, but I just I don't have any hustle left. Like,
Yeah.
I think there's like, and I think maybe 10 years ago I did, but like now I'm like, I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty satisfied and I'm pretty content. And I don't know that I need to kill myself to do certain things, you know?
Right. It's really refreshing to hear you say that because, it doesn't matter how many people you're following or how many followers you have. I think there's been a huge movement where people have blown up growing a following, teaching you how to grow a following.
Yeah.
Where you're like, what do you do? Oh, you just tell me how many reels that I have to
Yes.
make a day using a trending audio and what's
Yeah.
going to catch people's attention. And then I'm going like, okay, I want to share this study about X, Y, and Z. Am I doing a weird voiceover to get people's attention and like to be in the algorithm to keep up
Hmm.
with the kids? And I'm like, I'm tired. Like, I don't want to, that's not inspiring. You just want to help people or you just want to share the
Yeah.
recipes that inspire you. I love, yeah, like have some boundaries there and just say, if people really want to find my recipes, they'll find me. They'll be on, they'll get my books, they'll be on my app and they'll probably be watching your stories and following along and you'll show up in their feed. And that's good enough. Like
Yeah.
especially when things are gone in an instant. Like you might post something and 2 days later it's old news and it's
Hmm.
like how much work and effort and time of your life went into that. It's like it's something to weigh.
Totally. I mean, I kind of look at people I admire, like in different spaces, and I was like, oh well, look, like I'm a big fan of Smitten Kitchen.
Yeah.
They're not paleo recipes or anything, but she's like an OG food blogger, but her writing's amazing, her recipes are amazing. And I was like, I don't see Deb, doing these wacky lip sync IG reels.
Yep.
People are just going to her to find recipes that they love and trust, and they love her voice. And other people, I'm like, look, this guy, this is someone I really admire. He just is like doing some simple thing where he just talks to the camera and it's like terrible camera work, but I still like to see it. So
Yeah.
I think you just have to do, what you, and obviously you should, it's not like, I mean, I sometimes, I kind of feel like, oh, I'm just like, can't teach an old dog new tricks kind of deal or like these days. But you do need to kind of iterate and change, but
Right.
I think you can choose what you decide to do. And I think there's just so much FOMO these days. Um, and it's, it's, things are not as like earth shattering as you think they are, or you're not missing out on something that you think everyone is doing. Like, I think it'll all be fine. It'll all work out.
Yeah. I think it's interesting too because people like I personally have like tried things on. I'm like, okay, let's try this. Let's make a reel.
Mm-hmm.
Let's try this voiceover thing. Let's try posting as much as you can. And it's like eventually it's just like this isn't me and this feels like burnout. So
Yeah.
what is true to you and things are so fleeting. Like remember when
Mm-hmm.
people were on Periscope
Yeah.
and
I
then
was on Periscope.
yeah, there
I
you
think it was
go.
also Meerkat. Meerkat and Periscope were on at the same time. It was like this live video format. And now
Yeah.
like there's like nobody does IG lives or Facebook lives anymore because it's I think people, and I think especially because of pandemic and the Zoom, like everybody's just zoomed out
Yeah.
for the past 2 years. But I think it's important to I think technology is amazing. And as a, person who's 48, like I remember pre everything, right? Um, and I think it is cool that you can Google the answer to something right away,
Hmm.
but I don't think it's great to like wake up and look at your phone, you know what I mean? And just, and like walking around with the phone in your face or like I see all these kids riding to school with you know, their phone in their hands. And I'm like, oh, you guys should put that away because you need to like look far away to like so you don't wear glasses. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like there's lots of like you need to go outside, you need to play, you need to do things.
Definitely. Well, speaking of which, I'd love to know as we close up today's podcast, what lights you up? Like, not necessarily like you as a wife or a mom,
Mm-hmm.
but like Michelle, like what lights you up and makes you so happy and so excited about life and makes you feel your best?
Um, I mean, I think I love laughing a lot. Like I just love people who make me laugh and I like humor a lot. Um, and I just love chilling with my friends and family. Like I am a total introvert. I'm a high functioning introvert. Like I can go out and do things, but I just love watching TV and just chilling with my friends and family. I know that's like so boring, but I'm so square.
No, it's it's not, I being in relationships is sort of a lost art for people. I look at our younger generations and I worry because they're so connected through all of these social
Mhm.
platforms, but sometimes they have such a hard time connecting in real life.
Mhm.
Whereas I remember growing up and having 45-minute phone calls with my best friend from high
Yeah.
school and writing notes back and forth and just being so excited to exchange notes
Mhm.
between classes and sleepovers and all that like the good quality like friend time that I worry that my kids are going to miss out on that.
I think it still happens because I think like I see with my kids like they do connect and they do like Snapchat or whatever it is with their friends, but like my kid was like, "Oh, I'm going to go to the Y and play basketball with my friends." And then my older son is like a theater kid. He's like, I'm going to go hang with my theater friends, or they have like theater practice. And so they are like just hanging out. And I think everybody still craves that. And so I think, because otherwise it's just so empty. Like you can just look at your phone and then you can just feel bad because everyone's just showing the highlights of whatever they're doing.
Right.
Um, but I think if you just go out and hang with people, you're like, oh no, this is better. It's better to just have my phone in my backpack and not in my hand.
Definitely. Well, Michelle, thank you so much for being here and for just making me laugh and and sharing your tips. I'm gonna go get a rice cooker so I don't have to be
Well,
over
okay.
the
So the
stove.
rice cooker does have a nonstick coating. So that's another thing. You can make your rice cooker in the Instant Pot. It's
I
okay. It's not as great as the Zojirushi, but again, just disclaimer.
Thank you. Thank you. I know it's everywhere. What can we do?
I know.
I have made rice in the Instapot too, and I think it's pretty good. So
Yeah, it's not bad.
I have a low bar compared to compared to what you're making at your house, I think. Um, I was a veggies and salt kind of person. So your spice is really up the ante over here. Um, Anyways, where can people follow along? Where can they snag your books? Tell us about your app. What's your Instagram handle? I mean, they should know, but go ahead.
I think I'm Nom Nom Paleo on everything except for TikTok, but I don't really care about TikTok, so it doesn't matter. But you can buy my books anywhere books are sold. I always recommend people to support their local indie because, you got to support small businesses. My app is available only in the iOS store because it is only an iOS app. Um, and I don't know, just Nom Nom Paleo. If you Google Nom Nom Paleo, you'll find me.
All right. I'm going to go download your app. Thanks.
I can send you a code.
That's really sweet, but I'm going to support small businesses. Thank you so much for being here, Michelle.
Oh, it was my pleasure.